Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's another episode of the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, here over in a very hot, humid London, not sunny, but hot and humid, and Jason Whitehead over in the States. Say hello, Jace.
Hi, everyone. Coming to you live from the Washington, D.C. area. Great to be here.
We are here with another very exciting guest podcast. It's a couple of weeks, I think, since we've done one now, Jason. So really excited about this. This one is with a good friend called Sasi Yajamanyam. Sorry, I did get it there, Sasi.
Yes.
Sasi is currently at ServiceNow. He's built and led customer success programs and teams at small and large organizations over the last 10, 15 years. So an extensive amount of experience. He's also in the process of publishing a book, which he's really excited about. So what we're going to talk about today with Sasi is the state of customer success today. And really, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the issues we're seeing? And also get some insight into your book, Sasi, and why you've published the book, and really how you see customer success growing and how it makes that transition from being a team to not just the C-level responsibility to the business level responsibility. So a really cool, all-encompassing conversation, which I think is one that all of our listeners are going to be really excited about. So Sasi, hello, welcome. Do you want to do a quick intro to yourself, sir?
Yes, thank you, Jason. First of all, thank you both for having me here. I've told you guys this before, as I get a lot out of listening to your podcast. So I've gotten a lot as part of just learning about what's going on, as well as the research for my book. Thank you again for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Just a background, as Jason, you mentioned, I've done various things related to customer success. I've started customer success teams. I have been in professional services. Today at ServiceNow, I'm leading a team that actually provides, we call it backend, if you will, knowledge infrastructure for our frontline customer success team. So we write best practices that these teams take to the field. And all of these different hats I worn is really one of the motivations for me to start thinking about, okay, what's next for what this thing called customer success? And that was my starting point for the project around writing this book as my side project, if you will.
However, I mean, I know ServiceNow, you guys, I think we were one of your first, some years back, I was at another company, we were one of your first European customers. And so I've seen it grow. How has customer success evolved at ServiceNow? Because I think it is a customer focused organization and there's a lot of investment being put into it. But how have you seen in your time there, how have you seen customer success grow and evolve?
Yeah, no, it has, as any other company that grows. When I joined ServiceNow, to tell this story, we didn't have anything called customer success. We were, of course, very customer focused, but we were very professional services intensive. Right around the time I joined, we had a new CEO take over, John Donahoe, who is now the CEO of Nike. He did this listening tour with a lot of our customers. And one of the takeaways that he came away with, where customers were telling him, say, John, you need to help us, save us from ourselves in some sense, because the platform had grown, it had become more complex, and customers were almost getting themselves into trouble. So that was our origins, where John said, hey, we need an overarching methodology or an approach to deal with customers, not as just a sales transactions, but how do we manage and help customers through their journey? That was about 3 years ago, and customer success today looks very different than what it looked when John initiated it. We have all of the standard motions that we talk about: high-touch customer success. We have low-touch customer success. We are actually embarking on a project of what we are calling the next-gen customer success at ServiceNow. So it has gone from a very professional services-centric to what we traditionally consider customer success. And now we are looking at what's the next generation of customer success, which is more of a packaging of all post-sale activity into a package of service offerings.
I think it's great when you see that evolution. Like you say, a lot of organizations start off as kind of professional services, and it's that evolution.
Yeah.
How do you, when you look at the book and the work you've been doing and this kind of idea about the state of customer success today, what do you think the state is today? Why are we talking about this now?
Yeah, I think so. As ServiceNow was going through this evolution, my thinking has evolved along with it. And I was thinking the reason we are in this third iteration, I was thinking, why is it so hard? What is it about this thing called customer success that is hard? So that was the question I wanted to answer when I started the book. Mm-hmm. What I have found is, I have actually a chapter title in my book. It's called, it's the The good thing is there is a lot of focus and attention. We have your podcast and a lot of folks talking about it. I think that's the great. The thing that is yet to be solved is it's a state of what I call a complexity and confusion when it comes to customer success. A lot of questions. Who should it report to? What should customer success OKRs be? What should be the sphere of responsibility for customer success? Is professional services part of customer success? Is support part of it? So there's a lot of questions. And what I have found is the answer is yes, and all of them, right? Because it's very complex. It changes. As the organization evolves, the answers to those questions changes. As your product suite evolves, the answer to those questions changes. So we are at a very interesting point in my mind when it comes to customer success, where probably it's a good pivot point to rethink what we mean by customer success. So as I did more research, that's where I'm presenting a point of view in the book, and where I have in my mind on this, where we are is in a very interesting pivot point in this thing called customer success. And I'm happy to go into that, but that's where I feel like we are at.
I think that's so true. And just having been in this space for a while and just seeing the early iterations of, okay, we need a team called customer success, and what do we do? And let's try and tell people more about our product, or let's see how we organize internally. And now people are realizing, okay, once we've done a lot of the basics, and once we, have our tools and everything's in place, then we still are stuck with the question, what do we do? And who does it? And what does that look like? And I think there's a lot of area there that people don't have answers yet, and at least they're starting to ask the right questions, which I think is nice. Coming back to what you said, because I remember when you and I talked a while ago, we were talking about the book, and I was just really interested in what you had to say and the direction we're going with it. Can you tell us a bit more about the book itself, and both your motivation to write it, and what are some of the big gaps you're seeing today as we're looking at this pivot point and where we think it needs to go in the future?
Yeah, maybe do a 30 seconds on what motivated me. One is this just genuine curiosity on this profession, where we are going, was one of the motivations. The second was really I attribute to the pandemic, right? Suddenly I found myself with a lot of time, like all of us did last year, and within the company ServiceNow, we have a new CEO since about a year and a half now, and he challenged us to dream big as a company. And I applied that to my personal life and said, okay, I need to have a big dream, and I have the time to dream big now that we are all in lockdown. So taking a book and writing a book was my dream big thing that I picked up. That was the personal motivation combined with my intellectual curiosity on what this profession is. And the way I'm approaching, and this is my latest thinking, and I don't think actually three of us have spoken on this, is it goes back to Jason Noble, your question about the current state. If we think back to 100 years ago, we had industrial age where we were all getting into machines and producing and manufacturing. The byproduct of that economic shift, in my mind, was this focus on quality, total quality management as a management practice on how do you organize companies. If we fast forward that to the 90s, late 80s, 90s to early 2000s, it was what I call it automation age. We could call it something else, but it's really about automating business processes. In my mind, what it gave rise to is this practice of process reengineering, Six Sigma, and all of these, how you look for process efficiencies. If we fast forward to today, what we could call it digital age, or as World Economic Forum calls it, the fourth industrial revolution, the management practice that we need today is this focus on customer, and specifically the relationship between the provider and the consumer of these digital technologies. So where I am in my positioning of what we think customer success, in my mind, if we think about it the right way, could be that organizing principle that we can build companies around and put in processes and practices and systems in place to really get the most out of that provider and consumer of technologies. And of course, I focus a lot in my book around the B2B space, but it can be applied in the B2C space. So that's my aspirational view, that customer success could be this next generation of management practices around which we can organize our companies.
How do you, in some of the companies that you've worked for, ServiceNow and others, what are some of the things that you've done or seen in the business that have helped make this kind of focus on the customer be something that is part of everyone's role? And I know that's something that's very close to your heart, but it's how do we transition it away from being just one team, just one person? Just give us some of the examples that you've talked through in the book and that you've seen in practice.
Yeah, no, that's, if we think about it, every company that I have been part of, we all said we are all customer centric. Every company claims it. And I think they're sincere. We are all sincere about it. But when you peel back the layers of onion, what I found is we go back to doing what we know how to do well, which is really build our functional silos the best. Let's build the best sales organization. Let's build the best product organization. And that has been true in a lot of the companies that I have worked in. And one of the roles I did earlier on, about 10 years ago, is when I stood up the customer success function. We actually started off with any other CS function would be to stand up an individual silo. But what we realized there is whatever was happening in the customer success space actually had a very useful input into how the product got built, how we went to market, how did your sales and marketing messaging has to change. So that was my first inkling, if you will, where to say, hey, this customer success is not just this post-sale silo. It could actually be everybody's job. That was a small team, so it was easy to incorporate that into, to the product management teams, into the sales team's job to say, hey, everybody is singing from the same song sheet, if you will. And as I was doing research for the book, I've seen different elements of what customer success to be everyone's job in different companies and different professionals. And what I did, I synthesized all of that knowledge and I put it into a model of reimagining customer success. And there are different components that I talk about in the book. But so that was my first. Let me pause there, and I'm happy to go into some of the details of what I found in the model.
Yeah, no, I think that's so interesting too, that whole silo busting piece, because that's something like when I'm dealing with our clients today, success chains, they're really struggling with that. Like, how do we get sales marketing play? How do we do this? And I like what you said about early in the industrial revolution, when people changed the process. And I think now it's also changed the behavior and changed the mentality and get everyone realizing we all have a shared stake in the customer achieving success, as does your customer. I'd be curious to see in your experiences and in your research, what are the actual steps that, besides changing a process, change that mentality for people around it? Like, oh, I've got to do something a little bit different with my job, or how I interact with my client, or with my other departments. Because I think that's one of the big hurdles, is that change of mindset and behavior.
I think, Jason, you hit the nail on the head, because it's one thing to say that customer success and customer centricity is a mindset, but what you are highlighting is it's hard to put it into action. Yeah. It's hard because we don't know exactly what do I do? How do I make everybody think on the same page? So what I found, one of the ways, it sounds overly simplistic, but going back to the basics and really establishing a common understanding of who our customers are and what success means to them. And then writing that down in a common language that different departments can all use. I'll give you a couple of examples when I say who our customers are. As soon as I say who our customers are, I'm sure it was an instinctive reaction for you and for a lot of folks that I speak with. We got that problem handled. We know who our customers are. But what I am proposing and what I am presenting is, yes, you do. As a sales person, you probably do. As a product person, you probably do. As a marketing person, you probably do. What do we all think about the definition of the customer the same way? So a couple of models I propose is, especially when you have customers who are buying more of your existing product, from a marketing perspective, are they prospects or are they customers?
Interesting. Yeah, it's an important distinction.
Yeah. And as a sales team, if you are focused on, when you're selling something, you're focused on the buyer persona. But for truly to achieve success, what does the buyer do once they sign the contract? They bring in somebody, one of their teams who implements it. and who uses the product. So do we have a common understanding of that spectrum of customer, we can call it profiles, personas, and we all think about that end-to-end value chain as well is another example. And lastly, if we extend that, what if your customer is the end user of your product? How would that change how you go to market and how do you message it? And I have a interesting story I tell where a receipt scanning software, I talked to somebody who was running their sales team. What they found is they were focused so much on the accountants that they were selling the product to, but they realized the real hurdle for success was the accountants' customers who were not really willing to use the product the way they wanted them to use it. So they had to reorient their entire messaging and not even call the accountants who were actually paying the subscription cost as customers. They started calling the customers, the businesses that the accountants work with, as their customers. So they reoriented their go-to-market approach, which again, near and dear to your heart, Jason, the adoption was the challenge. And that took the whole team, sales, marketing, product, and post-sale to reorient their thinking. So that is one example that I can give. So I have a few more.
Yeah. No, actually, as you're mentioning that, I remember a project I did a few years ago with a large organization that was buying a CRM, and we were helping set up an internal user adoption program. This was a very large organization, and it was a new adoption department that they set up internally, basically internal customer success. And we were going through training up the staff who never really thought about it, and there was already friction between this adoption team and internal success team with the IT team that was responsible for getting live. And one of the exercises we did is, what's success for the organization? What is success for this department? What is success for you as a professional? And they're all really excited and everything else. And then the very last thing we asked them is, what is success for the IT team? And suddenly they had the realization that they were all about adoption, all about business value, all about outcomes 3 to 5 years down the road. And all of the pressure on the IT team was go live on time and on budget and no errors, no delays. Yeah. And suddenly they realized that they were working towards 2 other goals and just really fighting with each other. And that's just internally. That's even before the vendors got involved. And just really focusing on those issues can help highlight a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Jason?
I think that's something that you see time and time again, particularly in bigger and bigger organizations. We've talked before, Jason, but you've got these huge change processes that you're going through, and your IT team historically have been all about, can we deliver the right service at the right cost? Yes, now there's security, all these other things come into play, but cost is a massive driver for them. And when you're feeling that different pressure, it's huge. Absolutely. And when you've got to really get in there and break down those silos, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And even coming in as an external person, you are quite stepped back from that. And it's a really tough thing to do. And you've also got to look at kind of the cultural side of it. How do these teams interact? How do the people interact? What are the changes around culture that this service, this product, this technology is going to do? Have you considered that? Have you considered how it's going to impact somebody's job day to day? And these are all huge things that you can't take into account straight away. I think you've got to invest in it and plan through it. And I like the things you said, Sasi, about building out these frameworks and ways of doing it, because what you want to do is build up playbooks that you can then use elsewhere. Take it again. What are the learnings that we've done from this organization and go to the second one?
Exactly, Jason. One of the words you just said, I'll pick up on that, is you said, at the end of the day, if we take a step back, there are all these folks that we just talked about, the IT teams and all these other, they're all coming into they wake up in the morning with a job to be done. And it's a common framework that you all might be familiar with, it's called jobs to be done. And I use that as a thinking mechanism to say, as an organization, when you're going to market, do we fully understand the jobs to be done of our customers? And once we do, we have it documented in a way that we are all speaking that same language and that we can speak to the customers. That language becomes a very critical component to build the playbooks, Jason, that you talked about. I profiled a couple of companies in the chapter where, starting from what's on their website to their implementation playbooks to their value realization models, everything is around these business use cases and outcomes that they have literally documented. And it was a CEO-driven effort. So that is a big portion of the model that I call it the things that we have to do in the customer context.
Right.
And there's a bunch of things. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, let me ask you, as you're talking about this and the research you've done, especially around where you see the market's going, if we knew then what we know now, if there was a new early stage company really getting out in the market and getting its feet done and trying to figure out how to do this the right way now going forward, what would you advise them to do, or what should organizations be doing differently than they knew to do 3 or 5 years ago even?
Yeah, it starts with, for me, is the few things that we talked about, the definition of customer, definition of success, and using the common language or 3 components of the model I propose. And that takes, to earlier Jason said, a lot of these things are a lot easier to say it because it makes so much sense when we say it, but it's very hard to do it. And the reason that those are hard to do it is because of the way we organize ourselves. The second part of my model is what we need to do in the company context. First starts with understanding the customer context, and then the second part is what do we need to do in the company context. And for that, if we think about a more services approach, a portfolio of services approach designed to help these customers to this success, thinking about services not just as post-sale activity, but if you think about, hey, how do I run my marketing campaigns is a service. How do I go to market? How do I train my sales teams is a service that I build. Along with, obviously, how do I go to implementation teams? Once you think of it as a portfolio of service approach, and then think about what's the right way to deliver those services to the customer. And then the last piece there is the incentives and processes. Those are again those very hard things to change because we are used to a certain way. But there is some thinking in the market today that some are proposing. Should we be incentivizing sales as for the first sale? Should we put so much focus on the end of sale or the contract signing? And all our incentives and processes are geared towards optimizing that particular event or transaction. How should we think about changing that model where essentially we are in this continuous sales motion? And some of the guests that you had on your program that I've talked to for my research also, which a side plug, I have to thank you guys for giving me a lot of source of research for my so that's why I appreciate talking to you guys so much, because you produce some excellent content. So one of them, Rao, you guys spoke to Rao Dhaliwal. He talks is a continuous sales motion, which makes total sense. But how do we do our processes and incentives in a continuous sale motion versus then transactional sale motion? So to summarize it, Jason, it starts with thinking about this customer context or defining the common understanding of customer success and having a common language, and then applying that to design your internal operating model on how do teams interact with each other? What kind of services do you deliver? The last piece, if I could just tie those together, is we have a unique opportunity to use the information and data we gather from those 2 pieces into what I call a unified customer data. We are in the very early stages of being able to take advantage of data and using the data to engage with our customers in a new in kind way. Those are the last 2 pieces I present. So.
I think that question about kind of the sales process and the incentives is a key one. And again, we've spoken about that before, haven't we, Jason? But I think it's for particularly when you look at big enterprise deals and your account execs there, you're looking to change something that's been in place for a long time. And I think the benefit, if you can imagine a recurring incentive scheme, it becomes very appealing, but it's a big change to go through. Sasi, one question I'd like to give to you, and maybe it's the last question. In your book, one of the things that you talk about is the lack of tools for leaders to help build and create the customer-centric culture. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What kind of tools are you thinking about? What do you see some of the gaps are? And are there some tools out there that you've seen that are really starting to address this and help organizations push customer centricity so that it means the thing to your customers? I like what you said earlier on, that something that I've said in a number of talks I've done, that you'd never say that we're not about our customers. But it's how do you deliver on that?
Yeah, tools, I think there are a lot of tools, and on purpose, I didn't do a ton of research on the tools. I have to claim I don't know about tool set functionality. What I do know is a lot of the tools today are still focused on building that functional element, but some of the tool sets are starting to talk about combining all of the different activities around customer. But my impression is tool sets are still designed for the processes, but a couple of things that I have noticed is any tool or any set of tools that can help bring this customer data and using the customer data to engage customers in a new and kind way. I'll give very specific example. Especially this is SaaS makes it very easy to do it. Another company that I profile in my book is Sprinkler. They have this common language that they use to sell the product and implement it. And they have embedded all the data that they learn about the customers, which customers are using the product for which use cases and what's the value they are realizing. And they embed that in the product, and their customer and the way they engage and the information that they provide to the customers is completely different, because the customer feels a lot more invested. They are in the driver's seat of their own success, and the company is just providing the enabling tools. So when I think about the tools in the customer success space, just like my entire research was focused on, I think more about the tool set that the whole company can use, less about the functional focus of the tools. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I approach the tools question.
No, that makes sense. I think it is right. You're right. It's about because it's a very broad question, isn't it? I mean, you look at how many different tools there are in an organization. How do you make sure they've all got that right broad stroke of functionality that we need around customers? And it can be very difficult to get it right.
That's right.
Yeah. So Sasi, we're just about out of time here, but we always like to present a bold challenge question to our listeners as part of the podcast, really helping them to come away with some actionable ideas. So I guess the question for you are, what are the top 2 or 3 actions or takeaways for our listeners for ensuring that customer success is not just the job of the CSM in their organization? What should we be doing differently to make sure it really is the job of the entire organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll think a little bit about what would be the great challenge, and what can I, if I was listening to this, what would I want to do is I would go back to the basics of really having that common understanding. And that this is something that I've found helpful in my own kind of the day-to-day job, right? I would challenge to go get out of our own silos and let's go have a conversation. If I'm a CS professional, let's go sit down with the salesperson and try to really unpack, hey, who do you think is our customer? What is their intrinsic motivation for engaging with us as a vendor? Why do you think they're engaging? I would have that conversation with somebody outside of our functional silo and share the same with from our perspective, from your perspective. So that would be one challenge, is to how do you get out of our own functional thinking silos? The second one I would say is, this is again very tactical on the other end, is like process wise, incentives wise. If you're, especially if you're a leader leading teams, what kind of incentives that you can tweak that will get the behavior that you want? This kind of cross silo behavior would be the 2 things on 2 extremes. One is a customer centric thing, and the other one is more internal operating model centric thing. Get to the common understanding of customers and what kind of process incentive changes that you can tweak to get to that, to make that common understanding come to life, if you will.
Sasi, that's really cool. Look, a massive thank you. Before we finish, do you want to give a kind of a shameless plug for the new book?
Yes, shameless plug. Yes, I am in the final stages of the book. The title is yet to be defined, but I might call it something around reimagining customer success. And the word that I have come to hang on to over the last couple of months, and it seems to resonate, is if we think about customer success as the mechanism to make and keep promises to customers. What kind of promises do we make? How do we keep them? So you'll see the title of the book would be something along the lines of reimagining customer success, how to keep promises to customers, or along those lines. It will be available in the end of August, early September timeframe in all the favorite book stores.
That's exciting. Congratulations on that. I'm really excited for you. Thank you for being here. And obviously, when it is released, we'll update the show notes to include a link to it as well, too, and share that information. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And everyone, if you want to contact Sasi, we'll have his information in the show notes below, so you can go and click through and get in touch with him. Thank you so much.
Sasi,